Welcome to Bat Therapy, mental health through the lens of comics and film. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We're your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, I forgot how much I love this issue. I read it back when it first came out. I think it was like 2016 when it's the Tom King run. I read it back then.
If you've been listening to us long enough, you're like, oh my God, Tom King again. We get it. You guys love his story.
I'm skipping it. Don't you dare. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about Batman issue 37 from the 2016 run. It's called Double Date, and it is a lot of fun.
So great. I love it so much. So, if you have not read it, pause, go read it now. I mean, there's not really a plot line that you can ruin, I don't think, but essentially you have Bruce and Selina, they're engaged at this point, and then you have a married Clark and Lois, and they go on a double date together, and it's
to a superhero carnival.
Oh yeah, they end up at a carnival where you have to dress up as superheroes at superhero night, which very strict rules, by the way.
Right.
I've never heard of places turning you away if you don't. So then, so
we've had the opposite happen to us.
Yeah.
We got turned away. We've been turned away because we were dressed as superheroes.
No, that's true. That's so true. So for my bachelorette weekend, that's right. We tried to get it. What was it, like a speakeasy?
It was an Edgar Allan Poe themed.
I mean, let's be real. So I was dressed as Captain Marvel. I forget who you were dressed as.
I think I was just wearing a Batman shirt.
Okay, stands to reason. And I forget what everyone. But yeah, we did a superhero theme bar hop or brewery hop, or I can't remember.
Yeah, we just dressed as superheroes and went drinking
because it was for me, and they turned us away. I totally
forgot. They said we were dressed too bright. Something along those lines. Which, I wonder if I could have gotten in by myself. I feel like Batman's broody enough to get into an Edgar Allan.
You could have argued. You could have definitely argued.
I could have argued my way in, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, we have had the opposite problem where you're dressed as superheroes and they want you to dress Edgar Allan Poe. But yeah, so this carnival was like, no, you have to dress like superheroes. So Clark is dressed in the Batman uniform, and then Bruce is dressed in the Superman uniform, and it's amazing.
Absolutely love that, and I do love that Clark sticks with his Clark Kent by putting his eyeglasses over the bat cowl.
So great. I love the commitment.
Absolutely. And Bruce is just complaining the entire time. He's just like, I hate this.
He's so Bruce about it. And then what was it? So Lois wears Catwoman.
Yes. Yeah.
But then Selina just meows at the guy, so he lets her in. That was a little interesting.
She just has that effect on people.
Yeah, she was like, I can just use my wiles.
Just do what I want.
But yeah, so I love it. And I think it's a really great opportunity too for us to talk about, I guess they're beyond dating, because there's a married couple and an engaged couple, but essentially like superheroes trying to date.
Making it work.
Complexities of that and making it work. I mean, granted, Catwoman and Batman have struggles later, but still making it work.
Yeah. And I think I do love the way they do it. It's almost like they're showing the veteran couple next to the up and comers, because like it with Clark and Lois, I feel like their relationship was like, I feel like it really set the standard. As far as superhero relationships, specifically in the DC universe. I know in the Marvel universe, there've been plenty of situationships and relationships throughout. Because I feel like Marvel's more grounded, but with DC, it's like these are essentially gods among
Yeah.
men
Yeah.
getting married and finding their significant others and their plus ones. And so it's a lot of fun. And I do also just really love the different dynamic between Bruce and
Yes.
Selena versus Clark and Lois. And
Yep.
I always love when they point stuff out like this, whether it's in movies or TV shows, because every relationship really is different. Certain things work
Mhm.
for others that don't work for some couples. And so
Yeah.
I do love how they showed the different dynamic, and they also talked about why it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that too. So, for anyone who needs a refresher, um, actually, so Lois and Selena, this is the first time that they meet. And so they're chatting and getting to know each other, and they're essentially talking about how can you be with how can you be with your significant other. He's so Batman, he's so Smallville. There
Or
are these.
Kansas.
So Kansas, yeah. And so they're essentially talking about their different styles of relationship, and so Lois and Clark, they talk about being different and how their differences line up. And then when it comes to Catwoman, Batman, you have these similarities that they're highlighting that overlap. And then
Yeah,
I think at one point they're like, well, one of us is surely wrong, and I guess we'll find out. But I like what you're saying. It's not a right or wrong. It's because one of the things that you see that they have in common across their relationships is that they understand and accept their partner. They're joking about it, they're
yeah,
poking fun, but you can tell that it's they appreciate the things about their partner. And so even though their relationships are kind of opposites in some ways, they've definitely got similarities at the same time that show you,
absolutely.
okay, here's how they've lasted like they have so far.
Yeah. And the thing is, I feel like with them, especially with Selena and Lois, Clark and Lois work because they're in similar their relationship has more of an I feel like they have more of a dynamic where it's like, okay, he's saving people, Lois is reporting on it.
Mm,
They're technically on the same sides of the law, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, they kind of work off of each other. Versus then you've got well, and so here's what's interesting. So in this comic, they hit on Clark and Lois being different, but they're also very similar. And
Yeah.
and same with Selena and Bruce. They're very similar in some ways. They're also very different because it depends on what story you're looking at, but there are many times where they're on opposing sides of the law. They're working against one another, and yet they still end up being able to work around that.
Right.
And so there's definitely some really strong similarities each couple has, and then some very distinct differences that they have too.
Yeah.
And
And
and the interesting thing, so they both you have two very superheroes. So even at one point, Bruce and Clark are chatting, and they mention one of them mentions how um when they're talking about how hard it is to be able to have a relationship, and Clark's
mhm,
even questioning Bruce like, can you really do this? I mean, this is tough
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And they hit on, you know what, Deanna, Wonder Woman, might be the only other person that can truly understand, right, this
Yeah.
really strong trio. But you have two examples of relationships in that trio, and they have very strong significant others who are very
Mhm.
independent, have strong personalities, aren't afraid of holding their own. They're going to really be able to hold up against the insurmountable idea of being with a superhero. So I think that's really interesting. And I love how Lois and Selena get along instantaneously, because I think that would is exactly what would happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh my gosh, I love how fast they just became besties.
Hmm.
Uh
I think
besties in
later,
this.
actually, I think Selina does like a bachelorette thing, and Lois comes back, and you see that in another comic. I forget which
Oh,
one
I
it
love
is, but
that. I
yeah,
love that. I need to go back and just reread all of that, run because I loved it all so much. I loved
yep,
it all so much. I really wanted it to work out.
yeah,
Yeah, and so yeah, I really liked it. And looking at, because I mentioned how Lois and Clark are on the same side, but also
hmm
we have to remember they were also co-workers for a very, very long time
yeah,
together. Like she knows his alter ego as well as the Superman ego. And depending on
yeah,
different continuities, she dated one before the other. Like
yep,
depending on different continuities, she's like, "Oh, I like Clark.
yep.
He's bumbly and quirky." And then she's like, "Oh, that's a wonderful coincidence."
I know. How
Yeah.
relieved must she have felt? Like, oh, thank God, they're
Like,
the
oh,
same
thank
person.
God.
I mean,
Yeah.
mad, sure, but also just really,
Also, yeah. It's like, well,
yeah,
this can't hurt. It's good to have a. It's good that your crush is also your love, like the
yeah,
love of your life. This
yeah.
this works.
Well, and
Uh,
also, I mean, you have this thing with Clark where there's a very strong. I mean, we talk sometimes about how Clark's the who he truly is, and then Superman is the alter ego, and then it's the opposite for Bruce. But in some ways, it might not even be that simple. Where I mean, Clark has very strong ties to being Superman, very strong ties to being Clark. He spends there seems to be a lot of time he spends in each developing those different personalities and who
yeah,
he is, and they both have genuine components of him.
yeah,
And so it makes sense that she would be drawn and pulled toward these two different parts of him, and then it thankfully all comes together for her, versus with Bruce, he's a little less balanced. And
yeah,
actually, he he expresses himself much more genuinely as Batman. It causes problems in his relationship because this question of, if you accentuate the Bruce Wayne underneath it, can you still have Batman? And so he actually needs help from Selina to, they kind of have to figure out, how do we make this work, and are we okay with how Batman might change if we develop the Bruce underneath more. And so that's where I think some complications end up coming up for them, which, later on they come back around to things, which is great. Because you were saying, like, I wish it worked out. Well, then, like your City of Bane storyline, and they reconnect and they talk things through. And I, there's a lot of issues and conflict that come into play because neither one of them is confident that Batman and Bruce Wayne can truly exist together.
right.
Superman, Clark Kent, not a concern. They didn't have to worry about that piece. They just had to figure out, how do we juggle a relationship with the fact that if you're Superman, I'm pretty sure you're busy like all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think another thing that works with the Bruce and Selena dynamic too is because she loves Batman. She does.
Mm-hmm.
She does.
Yeah.
There's that part of Clark where it's like he's always Superman pretending to be Clark Kent and turning that on. Selena was always in love with Batman.
Yeah.
Just so happened that he was Bruce Wayne, and it's like, oh, well, now it makes sense, but
Yep.
I don't mind this dark side of you. Superman doesn't have that like dark, brooding side, so it's not really that much of an issue to deal with when it comes to having a significant other. He has a Superman complex, but I feel like it's in a very different realm than, hey, this guy keeps strange hours. He's never really happy. Uh he's adopts children all the time and teaches them to fight, makes them into child soldiers. Like it's a lot to deal with, right? But
There's
at
a
the
lot
same
going on there.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on, but the reason it works is because she that's who she fell in love with. It wasn't one of those
Well,
things where, oh, this is what you're actually like. It was more of a throughout their cat and mouse, well, cat and bat things
Yep.
where it's like catch me if you can in this like
Mhm.
flirtatious way. That was essentially their
Yeah.
first dates, their second
Yep.
dates, their third dates, and then sometimes they even work together because Catwoman has always been very much in that shade, that gray
Yeah.
area. Almost at times she's almost even like a Robin Hood figure.
Yeah.
Um
And that's
yeah,
why they can work, is because she's not a true villain in that sense. And the interesting thing about her too is she stands with Dick Grayson and Alfred in terms of her perception and the ability to see that there is a Bruce Wayne. And she
yeah,
sees it through Batman, but they see his humanness. They're able to pick up on these things about him, where he's hurting or where he cares about things. I don't remember when this was, but there was one storyline where she mentions, for a supposed loner, you've sure picked up a lot of strays.
yeah,
She sees him. She takes him in, and it's not, other people have tried to do it to take him out as Batman. And I mean, she plays with him and toys with him in a sense, but
hmm,
in some ways she's almost poking fun because oh, she enjoys all of him.
yeah,
But she sees that he's not always able to enjoy all of himself.
yeah,
And so I really like how much she pulls that sort of thing out of him. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of conflict and complications that they have, which
yeah,
is why they tend to be, I think Alfred's almost always on board, but
yeah,
Dick is skeptical, Clark is
definitely.
skeptical. A lot of people can be skeptical, but um
Especially
it, it,
because she's on the other side of the law, essentially. Like
yeah.
she's yeah. Um
And that's why I think Lois can respect that. Clark's a little bit too much of a Boy Scout sometimes. So I think
yeah,
he struggles with being able to see them together and concerned about how Catwoman is gonna impact things, or the fact that she's not cleanly on the right side of the law. But
yeah,
I mean, even with Bruce, he's got times where he's like, "All right, dude, come on, let's try to be a bit more Boy Scouty about these things." So
yeah.
yeah, but once again, Lois is the grittier side of Clark,
Yeah,
and so
she absolutely is.
you
Yeah.
know, so it makes sense that she's totally on board for Catwoman because yeah, I think especially because she's such a good reporter, she can see how, all right, this is like 2 plus 2 equals 5.
Yeah.
You add her into the equation and some unexpected things happen. This is great. Let's see where it goes.
Definitely. Well, Batman and Superman are uptight in their own ways. And
Yeah.
you really touched on a good point how Catwoman is a lot more chill, a lot more laid back and fun and easygoing, which is exactly what Bruce needs. He needs
Yeah.
to be able to snap out of it at times, and she's essentially the one that's able to do it. The thing that I was gonna ask you, because I can see very much so how Bruce and Selena are opposites, and it's that situation where opposites attract and it works. I don't really see Lois and Clark as opposites
So
as much.
what I think that they were hitting on in the comic, which actually hits on things I see from a very different angle than
Okay.
you usually take it from, is because Lois is gritty reporter, independent woman, and she's with the Boy Scout Kansas, who is literally perfection flying around trying to save the day for everyone. And so I think they were hitting a little bit on here's this big time city reporter, here's someone who, yeah, he saves the day and he's Superman, but at the end of the day his heart is kind of like Kansas, and in Kansas, versus, okay, you've got these two gritty people who live unique lives through their alternate identities. But here's the thing, is that I totally agree with you. I think that Lois and Clark have some pretty big things that are different. And if you think about it, it plays out in a lot of their storylines. He comes to the big city And then Lois rolls her eyes and says, "What do you mean I've got to like help this like naive guy figure it
Yeah.
out? This is
Ain't
annoying."
nobody got time for that.
No, yeah, no one got time for that. And then in this comic, she also mentions that her dad wanted her to go into the military, and um, so there are definitely distinct differences, but they both have a passion for doing what's right. They're both going to put themselves into the thick of it to get things done. They even have the reporter thing and then the reporter superhero thing. So you're right, they're very closely tied on a lot of things where they can partner very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Bruce and Selena, where I mean, one of the obvious differences is he is trying to chase her down at least half the time that she's doing things, because she's stealing and she's, taking things. And granted, a good chunk of that time so when she's doing something purely bad, it's almost always because she's been blackmailed or some other terrible things going on, or it's seemingly bad, but she's actually, like you talked about, Robin Hooding it.
Yeah.
um and so on the one hand, they end up on opposing sides, but on another hand, they're both humans
Right.
who've made themselves more superhuman and live a lot of their life through that persona,
Mm-hmm.
where the other side of them is a means to an end to get back to that persona.
Yeah.
And they both know what the dark and gritty and awful parts of life look like and want to make things better, but how they do it looks very different. So I think for both couples, there are things very much in common. And then the things that are different, they accentuate each other in a way that makes them stronger. And I think that's really true for most couples. Even if you're very, very similar to each other, not everything's going to be exactly alike. And no matter what's the same and what's different, you want it to balance out, where if there's too much the same, then it might not bring the excitement or even the conflict that you need to give you the growth, intimacy, and companionship you want.
Right.
Sometimes a little bit of conflict or disagreement or not quite being on the same page, it helps lend a different perspective. And
Right.
so it just adds more to the relationship. So I think it's all about how those differences come together and even how the similarities come together
Yeah.
on if it's going to work.
And yeah, I think, and you're right. Their differences is what makes it work, because I mean, it would be the same as a Batman to Robin kind of
Mm,
situation if Selena was just like, aye, Captain, for like all the different things that Batman says and does. Like every time he's like, no, we're not going to do that. She's like, yeah, we are. I'm hungry. Like it's, and
yep. And she's very, once again, she's very Dick Alfred esque in her
yeah,
own way. But those three tend to be the ones who will laugh him off,
yeah,
will throw in a little tidbit here and there, will annoy him with being a bit more talkative and
yeah,
making their stance known. They definitely have similarities across them that it makes sense. Even though how it comes across is very different, they have a certain style in common with him, or there are certain things that they bring up to him and they don't just let slide.
yeah,
That I think is very important when it comes to connecting to him on an intimate level. Where
absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with Jason Todd and Tim. The others are great, but um, you you have to cut through. I don't know what to call it really, but you've got to cut through the stubbornness and acknowledge what's really going on with him. And so
Certainly.
the people who are willing to deal with his reactions and find that way in,
Yeah.
those are the people closest to him.
For sure. For sure. And then on the other side of that, though, it's interesting because when I look at who has the bigger family that work with
Mm,
these characters, it's Batman. The
I know, isn't
Batman
that funny?
family is way bigger than the Superman family. Superman
I
family
know,
is like
right? Yeah.
Lois and Clark. You got Jimmy Olsen. You got Kara,
Mm-hmm.
Supergirl, and then you have his parents who are still alive in most
Yep.
of the on in a lot of continuities. Some of them they're not alive. At least Pa Kent isn't. Jonathan isn't. And
Mm-hmm.
now I think he does, like in this continuity, they have a son. They do have
Mm.
a son now, but if we're looking at that next to the Batman family, I mean, we've seen the Batman family poster. It's cool, but also it's a lot of them, right? You
It's
got
a
all
lot
the
of them.
Robins, you got Batgirl, you got
Yep.
Signal, you got there's all of these characters that
Mm-hmm.
that are in the Batman, and all of them know exactly how Bruce is, and so it is funny where because we think of Batman as this loner
Mm-hmm.
type, and it's like, bro, yeah, it's the
And
new
I think
millennium. You're not a
that's
loner anymore, bro.
and I think that's part of what's cool about the storyline where it's playing through their relationship, and even when they come back around and they touch base after it's fallen apart, and essentially this concern they had that Batman couldn't exist if Bruce was happy and had this connected relationship. And yet absolutely the truth of the matter is that he somehow has naturally drawn in, or and maybe it's not completely natural, but he's drawn in this family, and they're not always big fans of his, and there have definitely been times where most of them have said, okay, I'm out of here, see ya.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of one of those things where they talk about how love and hate aren't actually opposing sides of one another, because they're both these strong, intense emotions and feelings. And so
Hmm.
actually being apathetic or unfeeling is really the opposite of love. And so even in when they're turning away, there are all these reactions that are coming from these close knit connections and caring underneath it all. And so eh, he really struggles, and understandably so. I mean, he had his parents ripped away from him at a young age very
Hmm.
violently in front of him. And honestly, I mean, I feel like in some ways he's going to be most successful in a relationship, potentially one because he's Batman, and two because of that trauma, if the persons he's with can take him on, but can also kick ass, by the way, and be able to take the world on. So
Yeah.
because that's one of the things I feel like Superman has struggled with more than Batman. Is sometimes you see that Superman is hesitant because I'm literally the most powerful thing here,
Hmm.
and there's someone so vulnerable that I care about. What if
Right.
something happens? Where with Batman, I feel like he ends up making sure that the people around him are able to handle what's going on. But yeah, he surrounds himself with a lot of people, and yet it takes him a really long time to settle in with Catwoman. Um, it's, I mean, I guess you could also say like a family dynamic or friends or all that's different than the romance.
Yeah.
And also, like, we haven't even talked about that, like romance. What do we think that looks like for Superman and for Batman?
Yeah. And well, it's that's a good point. Well, I think it might not. It's probably different just because of the hours that
Yeah,
they
you got
keep.
to be okay with someone who is not reliably around a lot.
Yeah, just because of the hours that they keep, but at the same time, I feel like that might be a situation where both sides of the relationship could potentially have issues. Lois is a
True.
Pulitzer
Yeah.
winning reporter. She's all over
Hmm.
the world. She's locked in
Yep.
into her world. Meanwhile, Superman a lot of times is off planet,
Yep.
saving entire solar systems. And then on the other side of that, Catwoman's got plans. She's like, I'm gonna steal those diamonds tonight.
Yep.
Like, I don't like it's Bruce's birthday, but those diamonds are in town tonight at that museum. Like, they steal
But you know
both
the thing
probably.
is that he would almost see that as time spent together, because you know he's gonna
Yes,
try and catch her.
absolutely. Those
And
are
so
their
that's actually
dates.
yeah. So okay. So it sounds like one thing is you got to get creative. You got to get
Yeah,
creative. So okay, you're dating a superhero, especially you're dating like a Batman, a Superman, a big old hero. So you got to get creative and be willing to have dates that are a bit different, but you also have to be flexible. And it also helps if, yeah, you've got to have your own life, because if you're sitting around waiting around, that's just going to cause tension for everybody. So
yeah,
you're out doing your own thing. And I think though that the tricky thing is if if you're sitting around and you're waiting for them, that's putting some tension and pressure, right? And so they're just not going to be able to live up to those expectations of how much time that person sitting and waiting might have. So it
right,
can be helpful to have your own life. But
definitely.
then there's going to have to be, there's this, like you were saying, these juggle of schedules. So there has to really be this focus on making time for the relationship. So in some ways, we were joking, but Catwoman and Batman maybe making time for the relationship is like, all right, well, let's make tonight interesting.
Yeah,
uh Play the cat and bat game. But yeah, I mean, like, how do you make time for things? I mean, I'm thinking to myself, you know, Superman, speed of light. Okay, great. So you could have a speedy date, maybe have a little speedy something on the side. But that doesn't. I mean, Lois is human, and so that probably wouldn't really feel, I don't know,
right,
satisfying.
right.
So it would be tough. And also, how distracted is that person when they're with you? So
That
it's like, does Batman really put away, does he close the blinds so he can't see the bat signal? Does he even have dates at night if he's not chasing you down to because you're burglarizing something? Is he really not going to have his cell phone on him to like go off if something's happening? And let alone Superman, who he's not gonna be able to turn off his hearing. So he's
right.
hearing all this stuff so yeah, how do you even have an intimate moment when you're gonna be distracted the whole
Well, and I think what I loved about this issue the most is they showed those distractions, but it wasn't the distractions you thought.
time?
Like it
Mm-hmm.
was Clark and Bruce are having a conversation about if Clark's pitch is fast enough
Oh
for
god, that was so
Batman to
funny.
not be able to hit it. And they're both separately. He's like, "Of course he can't hit my pitch. I'm Superman." And Batman's like, "I mean, he can only throw it but so fast before the ball
Mhm.
starts to come apart. So there's a limit to it." And the girls are just like, "How beautiful are these stars right now? Isn't this
Yep.
great?" And they're
Yep.
just locked in.
Such a great point.
It was so realistic. And
Yep.
so it's funny because it's like, hey, yeah, they have those distractions from their actual job, but we
Mm-hmm.
also have distractions
Even
with
they have just like the everyday silly distractions.
our
Yeah.
hobbies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like they both like baseball, which I
Yep.
do love, and I would love to see more of that. Like the Justice League definitely needs to play like a
Oh god, yeah.
Memorial Day baseball game. Like I would be so down for that. And plus, I mean, it's not surprising Batman's into baseball though. I mean, he adopted how many kids? Like they
He's making
played
his own baseball
sports.
team.
They definitely played
Yeah.
sports. Like I don't see him as a soccer dad. So yeah, he was probably a baseball dad.
I definitely hear what you're saying though, and it's a good point where I think many of us can relate to the situation of, let's say that you've got a really intensive job, or maybe you're in school or something that takes a lot of time and attention. Maybe you're able to find that time and space to be with someone you care about, but your attention you can be distracted. And it's not always about the job or the school or whatever it is. It can
Yeah,
also be just other random things in life. And how do we hone it? Now, they were taking it easy, they're having a fun time, the women were connecting too, so I don't think anyone was getting upset about it.
no.
But it's a good point that they have even more distractions. And
Hmm.
so it could be, sometimes it's hard too, because if you're trying really hard to say, okay, I'm gonna try and pay attention to something that's not being Batman or that's not being Superman, you're
Right.
using so much energy doing that if a random thought comes in your head, it might totally distract you before you realize it, because you're spending so much focus on the, keeping back the bigger things. So I
Definitely.
I, I do take your point for sure. And honestly, I have no idea how they managed to strike a double date, because that means, let's take this in. Batman's not busy. Catwoman's not busy. Lois Lane's not busy. And Clark Kent and Superman, which can almost count as two, are not busy.
Well, also
So,
that means one of the
wow.
couples is out of town.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Superman can just fly him over real quick.
Yeah, that's true.
That's no
That's true. I mean, that's him being away from Metropolis, which is still,
true. Yeah.
yeah, to
I
me his
mean,
normal shift. But
I have trouble planning with friends who are not superheroes. I am color me impressed.
yeah,
I don't know how they do it.
absolutely. But I do love that essentially when it comes to, because the big question is how is it, because Clark is really like trying to figure out, okay, why is it that you two work? I mean, Clark and Lois are
Mm,
both trying to figure it out. And I do love that Bruce and Selena say the same thing. When I fall, he
yeah.
catches me. When I fall,
Yeah.
she's there. And it's like essentially with the lives that they live, it's like that's all I really need.
Yep.
That's all I really want. That's
Well, and that's
that's
what I
it.
love about
It's
them
not,
is they're like I'm a complete person over here, and also each of them still falls.
yeah,
And yeah, it's the support that they lend each other. And I acknowledge who you are. I'm not changing you. I'm catching you when you
right. And
fall.
because
Yeah.
there's always that quote where it's like they're like, oh, two halves come together and make a
Mm,
whole. And I'm like, that's not gonna work. I'm not half a person. Neither
mm-hmm.
is my wife. She's not half a person. Like, in
Yep.
order, I think, to be successful in a relationship, you have to be your own person. You have to be you have to have your independence. And I'm not saying that's the only way it works, but I don't believe that like two incomplete people can suddenly just make it work and be fully complete, you know? Like,
Mm,
I think that it takes a lot more than that. And in this particular situation, Lois Lane, extremely strong-willed and independent.
oh yeah.
Superman, extremely strong-willed and independent. Same thing with Bruce and Lois, completely
Bruce and Selena.
strong-willed. Bruce and Selena, sorry. Completely strong-willed and independent,
Yep.
but they love each other's company. They love being around each other. They're like, yeah, we're independent, but at the same time, I like for you to be my home base.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that you're bringing up is what do you get out of a relationship? And so, one of the things I just want us to be mindful about are there cultural contexts and social contexts and all these
Okay.
different things that could inform what you're looking for out of a relationship, what you might find beneficial and how you approach things. But generally speaking, I think one of the things that you're hitting on really well is the fact that what I think you're getting at with it's not I'm half a person, they're half a person. Whatever struggles a person has, whatever strengths they have, whatever limitations they have, they bring that into a relationship. And so one of the tricky things so being with someone else can make things easier. It can even solve problems. I mean, a plain and simple, easy one is two people coming together can mean two incomes coming together.
Right.
Or if someone wants to have children, but that can be easier when you have more than one person caring for those children, right? So there are all these examples of ways where coming together with someone can either be necessary or make things easier.
Right.
But we have to be careful about coming together with someone to fix us or be something to
Yes.
make us happy, because then there's so much relying on things outside of ourselves and adding pressure to that other person. Now, that's not to say a person can't care and care for us. That's not to say if you have struggles that you're not allowed or shouldn't date another person. But
Hmm.
it can be really helpful to make sure that you're going into these things with a clear understanding of each other, and eh, just like with Bruce and Selena. So, who are we as people?
Hmm.
And what do we each need to be caught for someone to catch us? And can we be that for each other? And ideally, there are a lot of ways that you're able to be there for yourself. And if you realize that you're not able to, that's a great time for therapy or reaching out to other people you care about who can help support you, making sure that you're not relying on a person outside of yourself
Yeah.
for those things.
It,
Um, Yeah, but it's a tricky balance. It's hard to know, sometimes it's hard to even be able to tell when am I supporting someone or versus um I'm the one that's keeping them going, and vice versa. How do I know that I'm allowing someone to support me versus I'm needing them in order to have a sense of myself? It
Yeah.
can be tricky gray areas. There's a lot of learning about yourself that happens in relationships.
And I feel like looking at their particular relationships, and I've definitely seen this in other like real world relationships as well. It seems like one of those things with their people, their significant others that they have found are people that they don't have to compromise who they are for.
Mm,
She's completely fine with him being Batman.
yeah.
Lois is completely fine with Clark being Superman, and it's the same vice versa. Clark is like, you know what? You're a jet setting, world renowned reporter. Well, guess what? Just so happens I can meet you anywhere you want.
That's true. That might make her relationships easier.
Yeah,
I didn't think about it that way.
I
There
can
you
meet
go.
you anywhere you want. All right.
Easy peasy.
You're a you are a you every single night you're going from rooftop to rooftop saving lives and catching criminals, and Catwoman's like, guess what? Every single night I'm also on the rooftops just doing something a little bit different. And
But even so, I mean, she has times where she thinks that he's too Superman-y
right,
and black and white about things. So she has times where she sees it as I'm actually helping in some ways that's more impactful than you are. It depends on the
right,
scenario. Obviously, sometimes she just wants something pretty, but there's yeah, they respect each other's differences, and they to the point too where she's like, if you arrest me, if you're able to catch me when I'm doing something wrong and therefore I'm arrested, hey, bravo.
yeah,
She's not mad, she's not spiteful, she's not going to fight against it. And same for him, is he's not resentful of her that he would have to go through that with her or chase her
or she
down or that she
outwits
would
him.
choose that.
Yeah,
It's more that they say, you know what, this is what our relationship is, and all right, we're good with that. And then you have Clark on the sidelines going, WTF, Bruce, I don't understand. And it's kind of like, well, that's okay, you don't have to.
yeah,
You're right, you're not in the relationship.
yeah, that's true. That's my
He
burden
thinks
to
it's
bear.
weird, but it's like, you know what, Lois understands things, I think, in a more complex level than him sometimes, and she gets it. She
Yeah,
gets it.
love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.